Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and along with my fellow co hosts, we like to review films either current or classic on this show. Of course, all with a lovable bear twist. This week, we have got a lot to bring to you. We're going to kick things off with our review of Scream 6. We're catching up with that one a week late because as you're about to hear all about in just a little bit. We were at a film festival last week, hence not recording. We have all kinds of stuff to chat with you about coming out of South by Southwest Film, but more on that later. Before we get to any of that goodness, let me introduce you to my wonderful co-hosts. Jim Pugliafico is with us. Hey, sweetheart, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been going to be 2 weeks between shows now, and we have a lot to talk about. A lot of exciting stuff. On this one, we have a new movie. God, I mean, we have all that other stuff we want to talk about too, which we'll get to,
Yes,
like what we've
indeed.
been doing for 2 weeks or a week. Yeah.
So much to chat about. Can't wait to get into it. But before we do, let me introduce our other co host. Will Lindis is here. How are you, Will?
I'm great, and I'm actually loving that Jim kind of accidentally set up a line from our theme song. It's like, oh, we can talk about what have we been watching lately.
Bum, bum, dun, 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 dun.
No, this is great. It's actually kind of weird. Normally, this is the place where I see y'all each week. Every Tuesday night we get together and we talk movies. But the odd thing is, we're coming right off of spending a whole week of being in person, waking up each morning and going and grabbing kolaches or whatever it is that we're doing, and just seeing a bunch of movies together. So this is a little weird getting back to the normal swing of things, and I miss you guys already.
Aw.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I missed you too. It was really fun to be able to kind of wake up each morning and do our thing, and the half naked scramble, running in and out of the room, showering, getting ready to go. It was quite the time. So a little weird to be looking at you through a view screen, Will, as opposed to in person, but you know, them's the breaks. It had to end sometime, I guess.
Yep. But, back to reality. And the great thing about this is, we've watched a bunch of movies, and now we get to talk about a bunch of movies. So the cycle perpetuates, the cycle renews. I'm excited to dive back in again with y'all tonight.
Hmm. Same. Jim, did you have something?
Oh no, it's just I was going to jump in during that other conversation, but the moment's passed. I was just going to say we go to bed together, we wake up together that week.
Oh, that is pretty true.
Do with that as you
Definitely.
will. Yeah.
Indeed. All right. Well, as we alluded at the top, we have a lot to talk about. We, of course, are going to be diving into Scream 6, and we'll do that spoiler free for a little while before we rip that band aid off, and we'll give you plenty of warning before we do. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, feel free to hang out with us while we chat about it, and then do what you need to do when we give you that spoiler warning. But be sure you come on back afterward for the South by Southwest film portion of the show. We're going to be talking about the festival in general, what our impressions were, some highlights from the event, maybe. And then, speaking of highlighting, we're going to highlight a couple of films in the first part of our South by Southwest coverage, things we want to put on your radar. Think of it as like an extended plug section in a way. Couple of films we want to put on your radar this show, but you should also be aware we're going to be continuing our South by Southwest film coverage over the next few episodes. So don't feel like everything's coming at you tonight. It won't be super overwhelming. We promise. We're going to spread that coverage out a little bit. But all that said, Jim, Will, are you ready to get rocking and rolling?
Indeed, I am.
I'm ready.
All right. Well, then we're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion of Scream 6. All right, Jim, if you don't mind, what the heck is Scream 6 for anyone who maybe doesn't live on planet Earth and isn't familiar with the Scream franchise? But right along with that, spoiler free, of course, what were your thoughts on the film? Was this one that you would recommend people see? Maybe watch it at home, skip it? Where did you come down?
Yeah, so of course, Scream 6 is the sixth installment of the Scream franchise. I don't know when the first one was, but like I said, this one's the sixth one. And in this installment, I'll just read from the IMDb summary so as not to spoil anything. Um, I don't know how much you can spoil. There's a ghost face in this movie, if you've seen the trailer, and there's a bunch of stabbings. So that's what it is. No, in this next installment, the survivors of the Ghostface killings leave Woodsboro behind and start a fresh chapter in New York City. So now we have Ghostface in New York City doing the thing to all the people there. We have some returning faces here. We have some, we have Courtney Cox coming back as Gail Weathers, and none of this should be spoilers. I think all of it's in the trailer. We have Melissa Barrera as Sam coming back. Jenny Ortega from, of course, people know her from the Wednesday series, coming back as Tara. And we got some other faces showing up here too. There's some notable exceptions. I don't want to know if I want to spoil any of the other movies, but we don't have. There's a couple of notable faces we do not have in this movie. We'll talk about those later, either it's spoilers or later in this. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a well done movie for what it is. This movie solidly knows what it is, delivers on pretty much all aspects of that kind of slasher surprise horror, I guess I'll call it, where we have, Ghostface jumping out and stabbing people, and me sitting in my seat trying to figure out who the Ghostface killer is in this version of the movie. But I think it's really solid. I think especially for fans of the franchise, they're going to see it, and I think most are going to walk away quite happy with this installment. It's basically the same thing that you get in pretty much all the other movies. So if that's what you like, you're getting more of what you like in this one. So I'm giving it a recommend.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that setup, Jim. And of course, weighing in with your thoughts. Will, how did this one hit for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is a franchise that's been around since 1996. To answer your question from before, Jim, 27 years of Scream, if my math is right. 27 years. Like, for what was at the time sort of like the new twist, the new turn on what it means to be a horror movie, kind of in the long line of horror movies before it. I mean, this is a film that is now, or a film franchise that is now part of that same legacy itself. I mean, 30 years in. In terms of how I liked this one, I liked this one okay. There's some things I think this movie does very good. Jenny Ortega is really good in this. She was very good in the last one. I really enjoyed every time she was on screen. She is just so remarkably charismatic and believable in what she does at any given time. The kills in this, when you're watching a horror movie, you kind of rate like how fun the kill scenes are, how thrilling they are, how exciting those moments are. And I think this one pretty much delivers on what it's supposed to there. There's some really neat set pieces where they take a specific environment, a specific setting, and they say, okay, well, how can we make this, now that we're in this setting of New York and doing something different, how can we make this section tense? How can we make this scary? How can we make this dangerous? And I feel that they accomplish that. Where I lose a little bit of impact is in two places. First of all, I think the metaphor of what the Scream movies are going for loses a bit of its punch with each film. The first film was supposed to be, what if you make a film that is a commentary on what it is to be a horror movie? Cool. I think it did it remarkably well. The second one, what is it to be a sequel? Oh, what is it? The third one is, what is it to be the third movie of a trilogy? How does that change the rules? Okay. Then we had the fourth one. What is a reboot? Sure. Then the fifth one that came out last year, what is it like to be in a requel, which is like a reboot sequel type thing, which we've seen a few of. That was stretching it a little bit, but this one is now, what is it like to be a franchise? I don't know. It's the reinterpretations of the rules for each iteration, I think, become a little threadbare. And they have to sort of stretch to make the rules of the movie work, but whatever there. The biggest complaint I really had, we'll talk about these in more detail later on, but there were a couple of places where I feel like the film didn't have enough follow through with what it was doing. And so that by the time all of the pieces came together at the end, I don't know that I was 100% on board with how those pieces fell. Yeah, it's a good enough watch. I enjoyed watching it. I think horror fans will watch it. I think Scream fans will watch it. I think it definitely plays well on the big screen, all of those different things, but going with tempered expectations. I think sometimes there are some horror movies that light your world on fire and change your way of looking at the world. The first Scream was probably one of those. This is not one of those. This is just a fun movie.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that the first movie came out in '96. I have a weird relationship with horror movies. Most horror movies do not scare me. Um, but the original Scream scared the shit out of me because, and I think I may have talked about this on the show when we reviewed the last Scream movie, but um, I could see people like going crazy and killing people for fun and revenge. And the way that original film kind of set everything up, it was more believable, it was more grounded. I feel like with this movie, it's fine, but it's basically a superhero movie at this point. Like the level of like without going into spoilers, but like the level of like physical punishment that people can take and like still be alive is like it's such a high fantasy level that it's insane. Like this iteration of Scream didn't scare me at all. Not even the couple of jump scares. And I think that's a little disappointing for me because I kind of liked that visceral thrill that I got from watching the first movie. But I think it's copy of a copy of a copy of a copy phenomenon. At this point we're 25 plus years into a franchise. And this film does try to do some cool things in terms of like sewing the franchise together, kind of unifying it, making it cohesive. I feel like if this were to be the last Scream movie ever, I'm good with the place that we're at. I would be completely fine with that. I think it honors what's come before while still trying to kind of do some of its own thing. But is it a great movie? No. Is it a good movie? I'd say no. It's a whelming movie for me. Not overwhelming, not underwhelming. It just kind of comes in. It's fine. I do like Jenna Ortega's performance quite a bit. She's definitely a highlight of this film. It's a shame she's not the main character of the film because, no offense to Melissa Barrera, but I don't know. Something about her acting just doesn't click with me. She doesn't feel real. She doesn't feel believable, especially up against Jenna Ortega, who, Wednesday aside, Wednesday was a very divisive show. Jim, I know you didn't like it very much. I didn't like it very much. But I think as an actress, Jenna Ortega is great. I mean, she definitely played Wednesday very well for the character that she is. But I think when you put someone else up against her great performance, it shows maybe how wanting other performances can be here. Of course, we've got Courtney Cox back. It's good to see her. I've been following her since Misfits of Science back in the '80s. It's interesting that she keeps being like the throughput character like through most of these movies, right? But like, I don't know, 6 movies in, it would be great to see them do something new with her character. And I just feel like we get the same old Gale, that we've had in pretty much every movie. Um, The movie's fine, as I said. I will give this movie an extra half a star. In fact, I did so on Letterboxd because Josh Segarra is in this. He played a villain on Arrow for a season, and he has a shirtless scene, and he's a very sexy, hairy man. And I enjoyed them lingering on his chest and stomach for at least a good 7 seconds. So gets a little extra credit for me. Is this a recommend in terms of like going out to the theaters and see it? I'm gonna be honest. If you have nothing else to go see right now and you want to see a horror movie, then sure, okay, go see this. But like honestly, I would probably wait to watch this on like a streaming platform, especially at this point because we're a week out, 2 weeks out from when this film came out. I know a lot of people saw this initially, so I don't know how many folks are on the fence about seeing it at this point. But I mean, most films come to streaming within a month or two, maybe 3 months nowadays. I personally would just wait, but that's me.
Yeah, and to pick up on a few things, Brad, you're right on. I mean, the copy of a copy thing sounds just right for me. But here's the thing. I think there's a good percentage of the audience for these movies that really just wants to see the same thing. Like they have no issue with seeing the same thing just under a new title with maybe a couple new characters, new kills. And that's fine. That's good. And that's okay. That's fine. I mean, and this movie's going to give you that. It's going to make those folks happy. If you're looking for something new or this franchise that maybe looks like it's going in a different direction, you're just not going to get that. But also the thing about the superhero, yeah, I mean, that's a damn big knife that fucking guy is stabbing people with, and he's stabbing people pretty deep with that. And then, 3 scenes later, those people are up and running around and okay at the end of the movie, or at least
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a little bit stretches believability, but then again, why am I looking for believability in a movie like this? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of crazy, right? This movie sets up its own world, and as long as it lives up to the rules that it sets, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, it's hard because you have to think about whether the movie exists within the world of the movie or whether the movie exists within the world of the franchise, right? If and I'm gonna lean on the latter since the movie goes out of its way to call itself like a part of a franchise, right? And I'd argue that while in some of the previous movies we do have some of those like superhero moments that you're talking about, people probably survive things that they maybe wouldn't have otherwise. Usually it's what feels with a little bit of like realistic movie magic, right? Like someone will at the very end, they'll be like, oh, he's still got a pulse. Or maybe someone will just like stumble to a doorway and just sort of be barely hanging on. And that's how we know that they survived. I feel like with this one, there were people that took some wounds and then all it did was turn their clothes bloody for the next scene, right? And this is a franchise that started with that kill of Casey Becker, the Drew Barrymore character in the first movie, in what I would consider to be one of the most like jaw-dropping, like visceral kills of like several movies. It defined what this film franchise could be. She's out there gasping for breath as her parents are looking for her inside. That's terrifying shit. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I get it. A movie can sort of define what its own rules are, and superhero heroics are okay in a superhero movie, for example. But here, I just kind of wish, and this is what I said before. I was being a little bit more cagey when I said it before, but we've pulled off the Band-Aid. I feel like when I said that the movie didn't stick to its guns enough, I feel like it was a little bit too precious with what it did in terms of how people took some of their wounds. And I don't know, it made it hard for me to like care about the stakes of the movie when that happens. Like, I don't understand whether or not a knife wound is going to kill the person or not. So therefore I don't know whether it's eventful when someone gets stabbed, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And speaking of things being hard, I think it's getting more difficult to talk about this film That's where I was going with it.
Okay.
Without getting into spoilers, do you guys have any other thoughts you want to get out before we make that jump into spoilers?
Brad, I will just say, because I'll forget this point otherwise, I just wanted to agree with you on the was it Melissa Barrera point. That was the same feedback I had in Scream 5 too. Just I thought she was the weakest part. I don't want to dunk on her, but just I don't know, the material doesn't seem to suit her performance style as well, and so that always makes that main narrative thrust of this movie a little bit harder for me to get behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Courtney Cox, the thing you said, I mean, she's in this movie strictly for nostalgia, member berries, right? She has absolutely nothing to do in this movie, as far as I can tell, except be the reporter on the sidelines, right? I don't know if she does anything. So, yeah, she's in it, but barely. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you know, but I guess again, you know, for fans of the franchise, seeing her in the film kind of brings it all back right into the original movie or movies. So so yeah, I mean, it's good to see her, but nothing to do.
Yeah. Well, real quick, before we make the spoiler jump, we have a couple of comments in the chat. Thomas says, "Howdy, guys. Hey
Here's
there.
Tom. Hey,
Welcome.
Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Glad to see you, Tom." And then David says, "Did you guys know that Wes Craven had a cameo in the original Scream? He's a janitor dressed like Freddy Krueger."
Yes. The character's name is even Freddy, like the Fonz. Henry Winkler at one point in that movie says mentions the janitor, and you cut to the hallway and there's Wes Craven standing in the most ridiculous red and green sweater, like with the big brown hat on, and he just looks up sort of suspiciously as he's like mopping or picking something up. It feels like something out of like Scary Movie instead of Scream, and I kind of love it for that. So David,
Yeah.
actually, thank you for flagging that. Like that's a favorite like Scream moment memory, and you just put a smile on my face by kind of like re-pulling that image to me.
Yeah, reminding us of that. Yeah.
Indeed. Good stuff. Thanks, David. All right. We're going to go ahead and get into our spoiler section. We're going to be talking spoilers for Scream 6 for probably the next 15 minutes or so. If you've not yet seen Scream 6 and you value your virginal innocence where the plot of the film is concerned, this is your chance to step away for the next 15 minutes and then come on back because you don't want to miss part one of our South by Southwest film coverage. Definitely return for that. If you are listening through the magic of digital tape delay, use the time index in the show notes to skip around as needed. All of that said, spoilers are officially fair game for Scream 6. Where do you guys want to start?
Core
Well,
4.
What's that?
I want to start with the core 4.
The core 4. Go ahead.
Well, it's so you establish this thing. There were like 4 main survivors from the last film, which was the Jen Ortega character, Melissa Barrera, and then the Meeks twins, which were Mindy and Chad. And they kind of have this whole thing about they're core four. Chad and Mindy get essentially killed in this movie, and both of them are allowed to just sort of not be dead at the end of the movie, and that I struggled with. It wasn't like sometimes someone will get killed or nearly killed, and then help will arrive at the last minute, and like it even happens with Gail in this one with the whole like she has a very faint pulse because they chase away the killer at the last minute. Okay, I get that, but Mindy's left for dead on a subway, and Chad is stabbed a billion fucking times by 2 people, like
at least 27 times.
And both of them just sort of get and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about that. Like, am I supposed to love the Meeks twins so much that I'm okay with that? I do. I like the characters, but I don't know that I'll continue liking them as much because it always like I'm now reminded of a sour note from this movie. So when they eventually make Scream 7 and they show up, I don't know how excited I'll be to see them. So that was one of my big points of contention. They didn't necessarily have to kill off someone from the core 4. You can do whatever, but if you're gonna stab them as many times as you do, maybe not having one of them make it to the end would be okay.
So let's do this. Let's do a little math. So we've got the core 4, right? Which are Tara, Sam, Mindy, and Chad.
Yeah.
Then we have David, the boyfriend of Sam. So that's 5. Then we have Ethan, who's another friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then Quinn, who is another friend, right? So out of that 7, the core 4 all live. The boyfriend lives. 2 of the 7 are 2 of the killers.
Oh, and then there's
right?
one more, Annika, who is the only one of the new characters who's not a killer that shows up, and she just dies.
Right. Yeah. And she's a lesbian. So, yeah. That's a little crazy. Apparently. That's a little crazy to me, especially for a Scream movie, which has traditionally not been afraid to just slaughter its main cast. That's just insane.
I mean, we had a very noticeable, in the last movie when they killed off the David Arquette character. That had legs to it, right? Even this one, I thought that, okay, maybe Gail's here so we can kill off legacy characters. But even then, we get a throwaway line at the end, oh, she's at the hospital. She's still alive.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the point? What was the point?
Yeah. That was one of my biggest bummers about this movie is that we didn't get the David Arquette Dewey character, right? I mean, I didn't absolutely expect it, but when I was watching the movie, I missed it. I don't know if that makes any sense. I mean, I knew that. Oh, spoilers, by the way, for Scream 5. I knew that he was killed in that movie, but his absence here is definitely noticeable, at least for me, in this movie. So one of the fun things about these movies, for me anyway, probably the most fun thing, is trying to figure out, right, who the killer is. I think everybody's kind of in the same boat. Do you think this movie was effective in A, disguising who the killers or killers are, and B, on the flip side of that, leaving enough breadcrumbs so that it makes sense at the end?
I can say from my perspective, I will say to some degree it doesn't matter. And I know that's sometimes my stance on these, which is I don't care if I guess it right away or if I'm blown away as long as it's done effectively, right?
Yeah.
I did I went into this one knowing okay, the cop is in on it, and the daughter, he faked her death. Quinn, he faked her death. So it's going to be the 2 of them. I didn't know about the other boy, Ethan, being the 3rd killer. But I was convinced we were going to see Quinn and the detective as the 2 killers there at the end. So did that bother me? No, it didn't bother me that I guessed that, right? Because again, the movie set up enough breadcrumbs where you can figure it out, but also didn't make it so obvious that you could not figure it out. But
right.
I think what was more troubling for me, though, is that we didn't have enough scenes with the Quinn character to really give a shit about her before she died or when she came back. I would have loved to have seen just maybe something else there. I don't know what, but something else.
Yeah, they did leave. I mean, they definitely hinted around about Ethan a lot. I mean, almost every scene he was in, there was suspicion on him. He was really sus about everything, right? He was always kind of showing up after everything happened or something like that. So there was definitely suspicion about him, but it almost felt well, it's too obvious if it's him, right? I mean, it can't be him. And as it turns out, it wasn't exactly just him. It was the cop dad, which, I mean, yeah, I it's funny because I watch these movies and every character that comes on the screen who does anything a little bit weird, I'm like, that's the guy. That's the killer. That's Ghostface.
I can attest.
I must have done that 5 times.
I can attest because Jim does I call it the Jim lean in before he talks. babe, I think it's blah, 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 you
It's
know,
that.
and I love that. I'm trying to stay quiet in the movie theater, which no shade on you, babe, but
Oh, you can throw shade on me for that.
I want to get into the conversation at that point. I want to be like, oh my God, you're totally right. Or I don't think that's right. And here's why. But it's like, I'm cognizant that I'm in the theater. So I'm just kind of like, could be, yeah, maybe, but what I found irritating. So the cop and the two kids, Quinn and Ethan,
All related.
they are the family of the killer from the last movie, Richie, who was Sam's boyfriend. Here's my thing. Sam and Richie were seeing each other for a while. They were kind of a big deal. Wouldn't Sam have seen pictures of his family or know anything about his family? Am I forgetting a reference in the last movie where Richie is like, I don't talk to my family at all. We're estranged. I don't want to talk about them? Because I feel like this is a huge misstep for Sam not to be like, you're fucking Richie's dad. I've seen pictures of you. Nice try.
I mean, that would be a Scream movie that I'd like to see, where like the very opening scene, like, are you surprised, Brad? And you're like, Will, is it you? Fuck. And then like and so then the rest of the movie is then like not like a whodunit, but like, is the killer going to be able to disguise themselves? That would be a fun way to do it. This movie almost did something like that too. I really loved, I've been bagging on some things. I really loved the cold open to this movie, right?
Yeah.
Where we got to see that sort of we got to see Tony Revolori,
Flash Thompson, baby.
That worked.
Yeah, we got to see him as a Scream killer along with his roommate. I guess essentially they were going to be like the
movie
new
partner, whatever.
as they kill Samara Weaving in the opening, which leads to notable characters and kind of the openings of these films, only for the two Scream Ghostface wannabe killers to getting killed by the main Ghostface of this. I thought that was a really inventive way to do the opening of this.
Yeah, that worked because you didn't know that they were the wannabes, right? Really. Yeah. I mean, you maybe thought that, okay, they're changing things up in this movie. They're going to show us actually who is the killer or killers at the beginning, and then the movie's going to unfold from there, which is, can be effective if done right. It kind of takes away the, who is it really kind of thing, but they could have had twists or something along the way. But yeah, that was quite effective. I thought that worked. I just wish they had carried it through a little bit more.
Yeah, but
you know what?
Oh, go ahead. Well, to your point, Brad, like, I think one of the things that this franchise does is maybe a little poorly is like kind of figuring out kind of what its motives are going to be. And I think some of the ideas of like, it's the 90s, there are no motives. No motives is the new motives. Cool. And then the first time you had like someone do it because like, you killed my son who was a serial killer, which was the plot of Scream 2. When we came back to that well again here, it felt a little bit stale, right? Like it feels so, it feels like an incestuous world. And to your point, like, they have to sort of hide the fact that people may not know each other just to pull off these reveals.
I'm shocked there wasn't a line from Sam like, oh my gosh, Richie never told me about his family, or a line from Tara being like, geez, bitch, didn't you see pictures of his family when you were dating him? Like something.
Oh, that would have been really good. Even something like that. And, just like, how did you not see this? And like, just like, he was really secretive about his family. Boom, done.
Right. Yep, absolutely. We keep talking about how stale things are with this. I think it would be a really interesting flip of the script for the next Scream movie if it was from the POV of the Ghostface killer instead of the victim friend group, right? Like, follow the killer as he, she, they are going through and killing people, really flesh out their motivations. You could even make them kind of like a fucking anti-hero or something. Like, I would love to see layers of complication added to this, but I don't think they're thinking that hard.
Or, you know, you can even do something if you want to play a twist within a twist. Like, you know, maybe you go back to the well on, maybe you don't go back to it, but like maybe what you do in the first place is you take the opening of this movie, right? Which is like the switcheroo, like the Ghostface killers, one of them gets killed, and then after doing a murder, and then like is now being hunted by the new Ghostface. What if Flash Thompson, what if Tony Revolori had escaped that and the rest of the movie was him trying to figure out who the new Ghostface was, while also like trying to enact his own Ghostface scheme. I don't know. There's something that could be kind of fun there, sort of like a game within a game type thing, you know?
Yeah.
And they can even make some whole things like, you know, guessing who the killer is so stale for movies. The new way to do the new meta is empathizing with the killer. I don't know. You can find a way of like making it like in Scream Talk, you know, have Janie come out and say some bullshit. You're fine.
Jim, you mentioned the crazy amount of member berries in this film, starting with Gale. I also want to just jump back to something related to that. Earlier, I was talking about how I felt like this movie kind of unified all of the movies, really franchise, you know, come together, whatever. And it does that in an interesting way, but it relies on member berries to do it. So there's this abandoned movie theater that has like all the cloaks that have been used by every killer, all the masks that have been used by every killer, every weapon that was used. There's clothing from all the victims that have been killed. I mean, you could probably spend 30 minutes just looking at a screenshot of that movie theater and picking out like all the Easter eggs, you know, and member berries. But I thought it was effective in the sense that, like, I don't know, it reminded me a little bit of like Zodiac, right? Like just amassing, you know, just this history of kills and pieces and it coming together. And I thought that was really, really a cool set piece, the way that they had that done. I felt like at the end of this, right, like we've really come full circle on everything at this point. It would be a great place to close it off. But I saw today that Scream 7 is moving forward, apparently.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
This one had, I think, the biggest opening weekend box office of one of the Scream movies, you know, to give you an idea.
Yep.
Give the people what they want. That's it.
And I liked the trophy scene a lot, you know, like I think that was cool. Like I think that, you know, if we are talking about things that are like meta commentary on horror audiences now, I mean, there is something to be said. The film didn't really make this, but I think it still stands. There's a large part of like horror fandom that is now sort of in like the collection and memorabilia stage of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can get your Freddy Krueger Funko Pop, your Jason, whatever, you know, like your signed Kane Hodder mask, you know, you get all of these different things and build your own, like, oh, this is my horror movie shit. I have that, you know, I think a lot of like horror fans like start to collect some stuff that they like. And so these things have importance. These things have relevance. They're almost like totems in a way. And we got to see some of that here. So I thought that was a really compelling part of this movie. You know, member berries or no, like I think it worked for what it was trying to do.
Might be time for a new franchise to start up, like a new horror. I mean, we had the Friday the 13th and the Halloweens and Nightmare on Elm Streets and Screams. Maybe it's time for something new to come out of the woodwork and you know, start a franchise out of that.
I would,
if you could think of anything, I don't know, but
I would recommend.
I could think of one.
Are you thinking about X and then Pearl and then?
No, because I haven't seen those.
You should. No. Mia Goth is amazing in them, and Jenna Ortega is actually an X. That was like before Wednesday. I think even before Scream, she did was an X. But Ty West shot X. And then Pearl, which was like a prequel, came out later. And then Maxine, the third part of that movie, is coming out this year. Yeah. So I would recommend those. I don't know if it's going to be a long franchise.
I'll check those out, but
they're good.
I'll check those out. But I think getting back to like Brad's comment that some of these, especially this one, might be starting to feel a bit stale. But then the other side of that coin is what I mentioned earlier. There are audiences, obviously, since this was so successful, who want to see the same thing.
Yep. I mean, that's why you're waiting for Happy Death Day 3, Jim. I know it.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can revisit that. I mean, that was its own thing, and as I remember, we kind of liked it.
Oh, I think we all liked
Yeah.
one quite a bit. I think
One was really good.
Yeah,
Not so
we were
much.
softer on. Yeah.
right.
All
Some
right.
things go stale much faster than others.
It's true. Last thing in regards to Scream 6, and then I know we want to get to our South by coverage. What did you guys think of Hayden Panettiere coming back as Kirby from the fourth movie?
Yes and no. I really liked her coming back. I like Hayden
Mhm.
Panettiere. I think the Kirby character, she does a good job playing that kind of, like that specific style of like toughness that she does. I think the character for portions of this movie really worked in terms of like being like the red herring, kind of the
Mhm.
character that you're both sort of happy to see back, but also maybe. I do feel like there's kind of a part at the end of the movie where they just kind of ran out of stuff to do with her, so they just sort of sidelined her until the credit type thing. But ultimately net positive. I like seeing her back. But what about you?
I definitely enjoyed seeing her back. It was a little unexpected for me. I don't remember. Was she in the trailer?
I think so. I feel like
Was
I
she?
remember
Okay.
her. Yeah, I remember seeing
I
something for her.
When I see trailers, I try to like actively block them out of my head. So maybe she was in the trailer and I just didn't notice. But it was nice to see her pop back up. Obviously, she's the Sydney stand-in this time, right? Like they couldn't get Neve Campbell to come back, so they brought her back in, and I don't know. I thought she added something. She was fun to see her back, but again, one of those characters who gets fucking stabbed and shot and everything else, and is fine at the end.
Yeah, you say that, but I really think Jenna Ortega is kind of moving into the new Sydney role. Actually, she feels like kind of a new Sydney to me.
Well, I think that the filmmakers, they struck gold by letting her survive the fifth film, because she blew up right after that. I mean, she's hosted Saturday Night Live. She started in Wednesday, which was one of the most watched like shows on Netflix this last year. Like she has become she's viral on, like her little dance on Wednesday is viral on TikTok. So she's one of those people who, she went from zero to pop culture icon in like no time. And so I think the filmmakers are probably savvy to the point of like, whew, we dodged a bullet by letting her survive
Yeah.
5. Let's keep putting her in these as long as she'll keep saying yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that, honestly, if they had shot Scream 6 a year later, I almost wonder if like they would have found a way for Jenna Ortega to have been the Sam character instead, or what have you, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe Sam, is the daughter of Billy Loomis, exits, and Jenna Ortega will take over. As the final girl. Final girl. I don't know. We'll find out, I suppose, when Scream 7 comes out a year from now. But fellas, how do you feel about getting into our South by coverage?
Excited.
Yes.
Okay. So believe it or not, listeners, our Scream review was really just the vegetables and like side garnish for this meal. For us, the real meat and potatoes is South by. So we're going to take some time to talk a bit about the festival, some of our general impressions and experiences, and definitely going to chat about a couple of the films that we saw. So hang on, stay with us. We're going to put some great things on your radar. Here we go. Our discussion of South by Southwest Film 2023. All right. Well, as our resident Austinite, it seems only fitting that you kick this segment of the show off. What the hell is South by Southwest? And get us going in this conversation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so South by Southwest is a huge multimedia festival that happens here in Austin, Texas, over 10 days every March. Let me rephrase, every non-pandemic March. We had a little bit of a gap there for a couple of years as we were all hunkered in. But no, South by Southwest features it's a film festival, it's a music festival, it's a comedy festival, it's an interactive media, i.e., like technology and marketing festival. It's an education festival. It's all of these different things together. And we're fortunate enough to every year spend some time covering the film portion of it. So this year, Brad and Jim flew over to my house, and we woke up every morning, drove downtown, and watched movie after movie. 20 plus films we watched over the course of the days that we were attending the festival. And I will say, we'll plug it later on, but you should definitely check out all of our letterboxds. We've been reviewing all of the things that we've talked about there. But overall, it was a fun time. Lots of good celebrities. We got to see some big budget films like Dungeons and Dragons and John Wick that we'll be talking about a little bit later on in more detail, as well as some films that are not necessarily on people's radars that maybe should be, that we will be talking about. But I had an absolute blast with it, Brad, Jim. I'm so glad to have had you guys come and visit and be my compatriots as we ventured forth into the movie Breach. Any major takeaways from you? Like, how did this year feel compared to previous years, since it was your first year back in Austin in like 4 years, I think?
Yeah, well, I think it was 2020 when we were lined up to go,
Yeah.
right? And it was the week of or the week before the festival was starting. This was in March, that everything shut down, right? The festival was geared up, ready to go. We had tickets, we had passes, we had everything, and boom, it's canceled, right? Gone for 2020. Then in 2021, they came back with a virtual festival in 2021, virtual only. Of course, we participated in that. We watched a bunch of films at home. We covered it on the show. And that was wonderful that we were able to kind of get back into at least seeing movies and getting that South by Southwest vibe, although at home, right? Then 2022, last year, they did put the festival back on. Brad and I did not travel for that. But I know, Will, I think you went to a lot of that.
Some of it, yeah. Like
Yeah,
it's just I did not do the big headliner stuff. I
right,
did mostly the virtual stuff and a couple of the
right,
smaller in-person screenings
right,
because I was still
right.
figuring out how much in-person time I
Mm.
wanted to do.
And then, of course, this year it's back, full festival. We're feeling a little bit more comfortable, and I know everybody's got their own level of comfort with, being around a lot of people, traveling to a new place, airline travel, the whole bit. And it was just so nice to be back. I will tell you, my biggest impression of this festival was, number one, other than it's great to be back in Austin, to see you, Will, to see you, Scott and the puppies, and just kind of, it feels like a second home. And being at the venues like Paramount, Stateside, Alamo, Lamar, again, felt like a homecoming. But what stuck out to me was the overall quality of the films that we saw this year. We may have seen less films this year due to scheduling issues, but not scheduling issues, just the way the schedule was set up. But I will say that we rated every film, and the quality of the films, even the ones that maybe didn't ring all the bells, were few and far between, and the ones that were bangers were were much more prevalent this year. So, props to the staff at South by for bringing in this quality of film, because I think it was probably the best I've seen maybe since we've been going. I'll be honest.
Yeah, Jim, definitely resonate a lot with some of the things that you've said. Really great to be back in person, doing this. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was fun the last couple years, like camping out in our projector room and making our homemade popcorn and like watching movies that way. But um, for me, a big part of the festival isn't just the movies; it's the Q&As after the films. And that's what I felt like we lost a lot when South by Southwest was going virtual. You know, you might have a recorded statement from the director or one or two of the actors, but it's not the same thing as like watching that movie in a theater with the cast, with the director, with some of the folks who worked on the film, and then having those folks get up on stage and be available to you, whether you ask a question or not. Chances are pretty good like someone else is going to ask a question that's like burning in your mind. It usually happens for me. It's really awesome to be on hand for that. um I was so glad to be back in theaters this year and being able to partake in those things. And sometimes we have to leave a Q&A early because of scheduling to like get to the next movie, because you can't just walk from one theater to another. You got to walk out, walk to the next theater in some cases, get in line a couple hours early, even with the express passes, which are like fast passes at Disney, in order to get into the next film. So just in terms of takeaways for me, I think two things. One, really fucking cool seeing the main cast for Dungeons and Dragons on stage. I think a big highlight for me was when someone asked the question that I had in my mind, which was, if you were going to play Dungeons and Dragons for real, what type of character would you play? My nerd boner was at full attention for that, let me tell you. That was so good. And then the other thing,
Boing.
yeah, exactly. Jim, you mentioned just the overall quality of the films this year. I'm sorry, I don't have aggregate data from previous years. This is my first year really using Letterboxd and sticking with it. But what I did is I counted up all of the movies that I saw, and I counted up all of the stars that I gave those movies, and then I divided the number of movies by the number of stars to get an average.
Yeah.
Other way around.
Stars over movies. Okay, thank you. And the average score came out to a 3.8, which
huge.
I think is just insane.
Out of 5.
Yeah, out of 5. And I didn't rate every movie that I saw the last couple years, but I feel like this batch of movies was better in general. Not to throw any shade at movies from previous years, but right. I just feel like the overall quality was better. So really great to have South by back. Of course, it's under new leadership this year. Janet Pearson, whom we love and adore. We got to see her while we were there. So glad we did. She has stepped back and a new team has taken over. And I think they did a fucking bang up job. So just if I was wearing a hat, I would tip it. To the South by Southwest Film staff and organizers and volunteers. Just really want to thank them so much for all of their hard work and putting on an amazing fucking time.
Yeah. The entire team does an amazing job, and hats off to Claudette Goffrey, who took over for Janet Pearson in that, in the, we'll call it the Picard seat, at the helm, keeping things going. It was a very good festival. You mentioned that the overall average of the films, both of you, that the overall average of films that you saw at the festival was at least felt higher than in previous years. And I want to echo that. Like, I think my least favorite movie was still watchable, and my favorite movies were really good. We're going to, in subsequent episodes, talk about some of the big picture items. We've got Tetris coming up. We've got Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Amongst Thieves, Evil Dead Rise, John Wick Chapter 4, all of which are going to be getting a lot more time. But there are two movies that we wanted to talk a little bit about today and spend a little bit of time putting on your radar. These are movies that aren't necessarily like the big sexy titles, but they're ones that resonated with us. And the first one I really wanted to flag for us is a romantic comedy, but I use that with kind of like a lowercase c, called Peak Season. I say it's a lowercase c because this is not a film that was designed for like, big broad laughs as much as it is sort of like the the meet cute, the understanding of two people finding one another. The description from IMDb of peak season is: an emotionally adrift young woman forges an unexpected friendship with a wilderness guide when she and her fiance take a summer holiday in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This is directed by Stephen Cantor, Henry Lovner. And guys, what did you think of peak season?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I really liked this one. I just liked the gentleness of this film, right? I mean, this was not an in-your-face comedy, as you said, Will. It's not like a Seth Rogen, rom-com. You're not going to necessarily get a laugh a minute, but the comedy came out of like this relationship that felt real. Um, as we mentioned, we have this young woman, Amy, who's about to get married. Her husband is maybe a little bit distant, and then she meets up with this resort outdoor guide, and I'm not going to say sparks fly right off the bat, but there's a magnetism between these characters, right? And it was totally believable the way this relationship evolved as kind of a into what I would call maybe more definitely a friendship, right? We don't know even how romantic this rom-com was. There were definitely feelings there between these characters, but I love the friendship aspect first of these two characters. So yeah, I love these kind of movies. This is like a date movie, I guess you could say. Would be like a perfect date movie.
All right. I am just going to share something with you guys real quick, Will, to answer your question. What did I feel about peak season? You should be able to see my letterbox right now and check it out. Peak season is 5 stars at the very top of my list. So I love this film quite a bit for a number of reasons. Without getting too much into it, I've been in a romantic situation where I was like dating one person who like didn't want to commit, wasn't sure that like I was the right person for them, but like still wanted to keep dating. And since we weren't exclusive and it wasn't like this defined thing, I ended up meeting somebody else that I caught feelings for, and I was trying to figure out like how to reconcile like my feelings for this other person and whether something was going to happen there versus like do I go with this new person and follow those feelings and shut the other thing down. And that was a hard spot for me to be in, and I felt like this movie really spoke a lot to past me who was in that situation. Um, it really sets up an interesting. I hate to use the word triangle, but like I don't know, like a three-way back and forth, right, between the three main characters of the film, and I think it's very realistic the way that it treats this situation and what happens. Of course, without getting into spoilers, um, it it feels earned. It feels like it's very believable in how things happen and unfold without going into the maudlin, without going into the overdrama. And I feel like that's where so many of movies like this just take a giant misstep, right? They jump off the diving board into the largest pool of drama possible. It doesn't have to be that. Real life often may not be like that. And so it's more of like a quiet relationship movie with some nice bits of humor thrown in. Um, it helps that the wilderness guide is a very handsome man. It was nice to have some eye candy to look at, but I think way beyond that, just the performances of the two leads were fantastic here. So best film of the festival for me for sure. But I tell you, peak season, there are some other movies. I don't know if you saw it on my letterbox that are chomping at your heels. Just so many other good films too, but this was the only 5 that I gave out the entire festival.
Brad, I definitely mirror a lot of what you and Jim were just saying. I think what's so compelling about this is I love a good understated romantic comedy, right? And this fits exactly that. I think about things that I've seen recently, like Cha Cha Real Smooth or Shit House from the last couple of years both kind of fall into this category as well. These movies that aren't about big emotions, or let me rephrase that. They're maybe about big emotions, but they're not about big emotions expressed largely. They're about big emotions that sort of like simmer under the surface. Because I think that's the way a lot of people really are in real life, right? You know, like we feel these great things, but we're put in these situations where we have to figure out how to navigate them while maintaining our decorum or our sense of self or whatever it is that we're having to do, while also feeling this feeling of longing or want or distrust or whatever it is we're feeling. I think this movie captures that super well. This is a beautiful movie too. You know, it's shot out in the wilderness of Wyoming, and so all of the different shots where they're hiking or fishing or anything like that, they just look pretty. The characters are fun, and that includes the supporting characters too. I mean, she's only in it for a moment, but we have Stephanie Courtney, the Geico lady, Flo,
Yeah.
is in the. I'm sorry, Progressive Lady. The Progressive Lady Flo is in
Progressive
this.
lady.
We also see Fred Melamed's in this, super briefly as well. I always like seeing him and stuff. And there are several other supporting characters. I was doing a little bit of research after watching this, Brad. So these same director-writers made another movie during COVID that was about this couple that is like getting ready to break up, but then lockdown happens. They're sort of stuck staying together. And the lead of that is the boyfriend in this one.
Okay.
The two leads of it,
The fiance.
yeah, the two leads in this one are supporting characters in it, and two of the other supporting characters are also. So they've reused the same cast. So I'm interested in going and watching that because it's the same creators. I want to see kind of what that chemistry looks like. That one's called The End of Us, but Peak Season is one that you should definitely put on your lists to look out for. I don't see anything about it having distribution yet. But now is always the time for this and anything that we talk about on this podcast about any South by Southwest film. Now is the time to look up these films, follow them on whatever their socials are, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, keep track of their news. A lot of times films at this point, the word of mouth and the buzz is what gets them to get picked up for distribution so that they can show up on streaming, get a theatrical, whatever it happens to be. But that only happens if you shine a light under them. Otherwise, they sometimes just don't make it there. So this is one that I think it's fair to say all three of us believe in enough to say, hey, keep an eye out for Peak Season and help be one of the champions so that you can see it as well.
Absolutely.
Anything else on Peak Season before we jump over to the next movie?
No, I think I'm good.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think it was a hit for all of us.
All right. So we just talked about an understated rom-com. Let's jump back into the world of horror with a new film called Talk to Me. Talk to Me, the IMDb description of this one is when a group of friends discover how to conjure spirits using an embalmed hand, they become hooked on the new thrill until one of them goes too far and unleashes terrifying supernatural forces. Now, this one is sort of on the bubble in terms of like, is this a big movie or is this sort of like an indie, like South by Southwest-y film? Because the buzz broke on this one while we were at the festival that A24 had acquired this film and was going to be releasing it in, I believe, May is when this one's going to be available, or later this year. A24 just came off of winning every Oscar between The Whale and Everything Everywhere All at Once, as well as having several very notable horror films in its backlog, including things like The Witch. This is a movie that I quite enjoyed. It's one of those films that makes you sort of look in the background of things and sort of like, looking through the entire frame to sort of see if, like, am I missing something? Is there something else going on? Sort of like It Follows. It reminds me a lot of It Follows. It reminds me of sort of like maybe a punched up or, maybe even stronger version of something like Smile. I quite enjoyed this movie. This was one of my favorites of the fest. And I think it's going to be one that horror fans are going to be discovering once it comes out in theaters. And I think you're going to see a lot of buzz about this one once it becomes kind of like the new Hereditary or the new whatever. So what I want to turn it over to you guys, though. I mean, I'm a fan of this one. How about y'all?
Yeah, it seems like seance horror is making a big comeback this year. I won't say much more than that, but yeah, this one, you know, this one was actually scarier for me than like something like Scream 6. This one, you know, there's some gore in this movie. Not, you know, it's definitely not a slasher per se, but it's got some things where this is a kind of horror that like resonates with me or scares me, right? Where you don't know what's going to happen next, right? In Scream 6, you know what's going to fucking happen. The guy with the fucking ghost face is going to stab a bunch of people. It's not that scary to me. But something like this, when this group of friends use this embalmed hand in this seance type environment, you do not know what's going to happen. And to me, that is where the horror and the, you know, the tension comes from in this film, and it's very effective. So yeah, I really like this one. You know, I'm not quite as big a genre fan, Will, as you are, so I know this is right up your alley, but I really love this one too.
Yeah, I think that I feel similarly to the two of you, and that this was this was definitely a highlight of the festival for me. I don't think I rated this movie as highly as either of you did, but it was still a good one that stuck with me. That I was thinking about, you know, movie after movie that we saw after that. You know, my brain kept coming back to it. Jim, you mentioned that this is like the year of seance horror movies. We saw another really great one called Brooklyn 45, which
Yes.
hopefully we'll talk about on a future episode. That was also a seance horror movie. But I remember reading the description for both of those movies, and I was just like, seances, embalmed hands. What the fuck? Are you
Been
kidding
done a
me?
hundred
This is
times.
going to be
Yep.
so stupid. And then I saw the movie, and I was just like, actually, that was really cool. I have only one big complaint, and I think this is why I maybe rated it lower than you guys did. I really wanted to get into more of the like lore of the embalmed hand that is like
Mm.
the vehicle that's used, right, to summon these spirits. And we get some of that, and I won't go into spoilers, but I just wanted to know more about it. The whole movie I'm like, where did this hand come from? And you know, like, how long has this been happening? And you know, I just had all these questions, and that may just be a me thing, you know what I mean? But I felt like performances were good here. It is one of those films where, Jim, kind of like you said, you don't necessarily know what's coming next, and you don't know enough about the world of like TikTok seancing to like I guess know how these things typically go, right? And it's just teenagers making stupid decisions. That's nothing new when it comes to horror movies. But I think that the element of like bringing spirits in particular one character and her relationship with spirits was really fucking interesting and cool. So you know, this wasn't the best movie at South by for me, but it's definitely one that like really made an impression on me. So I'm glad that A24 picked this one up. A24 doesn't typically like just pick up films like this, right? Like normally they're kind of more involved from the beginning, aren't they, Will?
It definitely depends, but I mean, especially with their horror library right now, a lot of times the pickups happen. I mean, usually not. I mean, not out of this festival.
Not like
Usually,
this.
like you
Yeah,
know, like
yeah.
it's sometimes it'll be. I think Hereditary was a. I believe Hereditary was a big pickup after Sundance
Was
or
it
Cannes.
Sundance?
Yeah, one
Yeah,
of those. But yeah, I mean, this one was. I mean, it was picked up before our screening, which
right.
means that you know, in some of the there's always another set of screenings that happens that we're not privy to. You know, certain industry screenings where people go in and basically watch the movie to decide if they're going to purchase it, you know, and
Right.
distribute it. And so something must have clicked at one of those
Yeah.
to get this one out there. Yeah.
Yep. Pretty awesome to be, there as that's happening, as that news is breaking. I definitely hope a lot more people get to see this, and I can't wait to hear people's reactions to it.
Yeah, this is a goodie, and yeah, and look, we're gonna have plenty of time to talk more about some of these too. We'll probably, as we get a little bit closer, I'm gonna leave myself a note to follow the news for both of these films, so that as distribution comes up, we know, talk to me. So I'll do a reminder as we get closer. But with peak season, when we know more, we'll double back to it in our plug section or somewhere in the show and just say, hey,
Yeah.
those things we talked about, here's where you can finally watch them, because we watch them and love them, but we don't want them to be just these things that we experienced at the festival and that's where they live. We want to see these little baby birds fly, and we want you to be a part of that. So we'll share news as we know more.
And Will, you mentioned this earlier, but um, I know not everybody uses Letterboxd, and oh shit, I just thought of something about Scream 6 that I wanted to say. Spoilers for Scream 6. Don't listen for the next 10 seconds. The Letterboxd joke. Film nerds
Literally,
with no personalities. Amazing.
literally every letterbox
Nerds with no
review
person.
is
Yeah.
references
Yeah.
that line too.
It's awesome. It's so good. All
It's
right.
good.
You can listen again. But the reason I bring up Letterboxd, we're not sponsored by them, I promise. But we've been writing reviews. We've been rating the movies. Even if we didn't write a review, we gave it a star rating. So if you're like, man, all these movies that you guys have been talking about is so much to keep track of, go to Letterboxd. We're going to tell you here in just a couple minutes how you can find us there. And you can see the full list of everything we saw. We've got lists created of South by movies and their rankings. You can sort it by rating if you want. But yes, absolutely, we will follow up. Will, did you want to talk at all about our continuing coverage?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're committed to do is keep talking about South by films, but we also didn't want to just have one giant episode where we just blathered out like a billion and one, quick micro reviews about them. So what we've decided to do is sort of sprinkle those reviews over the next few weeks with some of our content. So next week, we're going to be talking about Shazam, the new Shazam movie, and a few more of these South by movies. And then after that, we're going to have a week where we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and Tetris, which were both South by movies. And then we're also going to double back around at the beginning of April and talk about, I believe the next one after that is the Super Mario Brothers movie, and with a few more of these South by movies as well. So we're going to give you both the, like Brad mentioned, you're going to get your vegetables, you're going to get your entree, and you're going to get your dessert with each of these episodes. We're going to make sure that you are filled with all of your movie nutrients, big movies to small, over these next few episodes, because we think these movies are worth it, and we think you are worth it.
Absolutely. And we're already in talks with some of our podcasting buds that you've seen appear on our show over the last 10 years. We're trying to make a big podcast meetup happen next year, and that includes you as our listeners. We'd love to have you at South by Southwest, seeing movies with us and chatting about movies after, and it would be great to hang out. So it's not too early to start thinking about going to South by Southwest Film next year, especially as we're kind of rolling our coverage out, and you hear about some of the things we got to see and do. It might pique your interest a little bit. So definitely consider maybe joining us. Last thing I want to point out before we wrap, I know we're going long, but this is a little treat for our video viewers on YouTube and Facebook. Jim, not to put you on the spot, but you're wearing that super awesome fucking shirt you got at South by Southwest. Can you show that off to us, please? Because it's amazing. So good. Oh, he's giving us guns and everything.
Yeah. Hey, that's our preview for John Wick. He's taking us to the gun show.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, guys, let's let people know how they can interact with us online and find all of these great reviews that we've been referring to. Jim, where can people connect with you online and find your film review page?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. Those are my initials plus Out West. That's where I talk about film, and any movie that I review in Letterboxd, I will also tweet out there. But yes, I'm also on Letterboxd at JJP Out West. And I'm on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thank you. Will, how about you?
I'm all over social media.
Yeah.
Little on Twitter, a little on Instagram. I'm at Whatever Cove. I'm a lot on Facebook, so you can find me there. Just look for William Lindis. And we mentioned Letterboxd. You can either search for William Lindis there, or look for my handle there. My profile is Fundamental. So letterbox.com/fundamental takes you to me. Give me a follow. I've, like Brad, Jim, and I are all hitting these Letterboxd reviews very, very heavily because we see so many things that we don't get a chance to even talk about here on the show. So if you're looking for the stuff that might fall in between the cracks, just checking out those Letterboxd profiles is a great way to do that. And then I'm also on TikTok at The Movie Bear.
Awesome. Yes, definitely check out our cracks. There's good stuff there for you to enjoy.
Sometimes.
Oh, Brad. Oh, Jim.
Wow. I was keeping it clean, but Jim,
I'm keeping it real. That's all.
Oh goodness. All right.
Yeah, you should always keep it clean for sure.
Folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Bear, Chubb, Chaser, etc. friends in common with you. Please send me a message first, though, and let me know you're from the podcast, so I know you are not a very clever bot with a hairy chest trying to fool me, because it has happened in the past. I'm ashamed to say. I caught it. I fixed it. I didn't get my account hacked or taken away, but please send a message first. You can also find me on Letterboxd and Twitter at iBradPro. I've been tweeting out all of the reviews. If you follow our podcast Twitter at MB Podcast, we are retweeting all of the reviews from the three of us, so you can find them there. But Letterboxd is really the easiest conglomerated place to go find everything. So again, on Letterboxd, just look for Brad Pro. That's my handle there. Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We had a great discussion. A lot of fun to talk about Scream 6 with you folks. And hopefully we're going to put some great things from South by on your radar. Again, a big, big thank you to Claudette and the rest of the team that made South by Southwest Film Festival possible in 2023. We love and appreciate you. And we will see all of you next time for Shazam! Fury of the Gods and our continuing South by Southwest coverage. Take care, everybody. We'll see you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.